Hello everyone, welcome to Homeschool Autism Life. My name is Jamie and this week's video is another collaboration with my friend Leilani from Living with Eve. And she has opened this up to a whole bunch of homeschoolers who share here on YouTube, asking the question, why do we homeschool? She has written a book, and of course the title of it escapes me right now. I will leave a link down below where you can purchase it. But she is talking in that book about homeschool and kind of taking away all the fallacies of how homeschool isn't as good as the typical school system. And how this is something that we can do, and we can do it well, and sometimes often better than the homes or the typical brick and mortar school. So I really encourage you, if you are meeting those types of frustrations and trying to figure out your why of homeschooling, and feeling confident in your homeschool, I'm going to leave that link down below and encourage you to go get her book. Now, I love this question because for me, I didn't come into homeschooling feeling confident at all. Like Moses being called out of the desert to go free the people of the Israelites from Egypt, peeking. I did not feel confident. I was pushed. This is title. I was pushed off of the homeschool cliff by God. And I'm very glad that he did, for several different reasons, but it wasn't a fun time for me. It wasn't something that I was joyful about. I was stressed. I was exhausted. There were so many things. So for those who don't know me, my son, my eldest son, who's 14, he is autistic, and he was in school. He never went to school full time. I recognized that it was a trigger for anxiety and stuff, and so I was doing everything that I could to facilitate that. When he was at home, I was preparing him for what school was like so that he could have success in the school. And then my two typically developing daughters, who are now 13 and 11, they were also in school as soon as they aged into it. But we were in the school system for about 4 years. And the girls were about 4 or 5 years when I finally pulled them as well. But no, with Darian, he wasn't diagnosed with autism until he was 7, and it was done in a very roundabout way. There's so many things going on, and we recognized that the school system really wasn't equipped to deal with the kind of behavior issues. He wasn't a naughty kid, a bad kid, but if you have anyone in your life with autism, you know there's no forcing them to do what you want when you want them to do it. Like, there is none of that. And if there is, and if you do have to force the issue for safety reasons or whatever, it's a hard road. It's not easy. And the school system seemed ill-equipped, but I trusted them because they're so much more educated than me, and they know stuff, and they have access to therapies and stuff that I have no idea that I need to do, and all of the things, right? And eventually the situation became untenable. He was crying on the way to school. He was hiding his lunchbox the night before when I was trying to make his lunch. And eventually he was able to kind of tell us something was wrong. And then the teacher, I sat down for a parent-teacher interview, and the teacher mentioned that she would sometimes have to stop teaching the grade 2 class to intervene between my son and his aide. And I was like, what? I had spent so much time trying not to be that parent who was like meddling in the school system and between my son. Like, and he always responded differently with me than he did everyone else. So I tried a really hands-off approach, and it wasn't good because I wasn't, up to date on all the things that was happening. eventually we just asked for a new aide. I wasn't angry, I wasn't upset at anybody. I just said, you know, people who are speaking to individuals who are able to speak to one another, that relationship can break down, and you know, no worries, right? And so I said, half of this conversation is not, Darian is still not conversational. He has some conversation, but he's not conversational. And so I said, we just need a new aide. He's asking for his substitute aides all the time. I'm like, I think that will just solve the problem. And they were trying to do this switcheroo, very underhanded. And I wrote to the fellow who had been always lovely and kind and shared lots of information, was like, we're going to make this work. And I just said, so we've reached the point after a month and a half that I need to choose my son over someone else's. That's the best the school system can do for me and my child. And I got one line that said, you need to homeschool. We've reached a point where you need to homeschool. And that was really the first time I had even thought the word homeschool. That was the first time I had even was like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? But I'm really, really thankful it happened that way. Not at the time, but I am now. For two reasons. Number one, me and my husband had done everything we could to make it work. I don't look back and go, oh, I was too much of a pain in the bum for them, or I did this or that or the other thing. Like, no. We did everything we could to make that work. Number two, God made it clear that this was the direction that he was going to go. So if I had pulled him out, I probably would have been like, what are you doing, Jamie? This is the height of I'm awesome and everyone else, because I'm like, I graduated high school with a C average. I'm like, what do I know about homeschooling? And these people are educated. They've got a 4-year peaking. They've got a 4-year degree, if not more. And I'm saying what they're doing is wrong and what I'm doing is right. It's just so full of myself. And because of the way it happened, I'm so thankful to say that that's not a worry or a concern that I have. So praise God. He knew the only way I would homeschool is if he pushed me off of the cliff. And I would need that very clear, even if I am free falling during homeschool, at the very least, I know that that's exactly where God wanted me. It sounds really funny, but it's true. That's what I needed. So to make a long story short, my girls, I found the same thing happening with them. My youngest daughter needed eye therapy, and I will leave a link down below to her eye therapy story. She couldn't read and she couldn't do math. Didn't have any other behavior problems. In fact, her teachers loved her, thought she was awesome and epic, but there was a disconnect between what her eyes saw and what her brain was able to take in. And we kept saying to the school, something's wrong. We think she might be dyslexic, or like there's something. And they were like, she might just not be academic. I'm like, but she can't even read. Like, this is not. And I was hitting, by this point I had become that parent because of all we had dealt with Darian. And I just was like, here I am fighting the same battles and not getting anything in return as far as help. And again, by God's grace, we were able to find eye therapy through not the school, not through the eye doctor, but through somebody else entirely. And once we found out what was going on, she did eye therapy for a year. When I took it back to the school system, because they're like, she's doing amazing. And I go, I know. And I gave them the piece of paper for the eye therapy office just in the next town over, or the next city over. And they were like, oh, we don't need that for any of the other kids who might be struggling. And I'm like, what? Like, what? So at the end of the day, it really taught me that unfortunately the school system has some major, major faults and flaws. And I needed to be able to say, with God's help, I can actually do this job better than. And so that was my main reason for homeschooling right at the very beginning. Right now, as time has gone on and I have become the full homeschool mom I was meant to be with God's help, I say the reason for my homeschooling is to teach my kids what God wants them to know. And that might seem like a really lofty reason, but I've really come to the knowledge as the school system in our world gets to a point where I'm just like, wow. The conversations that I have with my kids, I truly believe wouldn't be happening if they were still in the Christian school that they were in. We're having conversations that I'm just like, just by reading, doing read alouds and talking about, just it's amazing. It's an amazing tool. And I love the relationship that I have with my kids because I'm not sharing them 80% of the time with the school system. So my whys for homeschooling is do what God asked me to do. Number one, He made this happen because I wasn't going to make it happen. He made it happen. And so I want to teach them what He wants me to teach them. And that is my reason for homeschooling. Now there's other sub things helping my daughter feel confident that she isn't stupid and that she can read, and try and foster a little bit of love of reading, just a little bit. My goal is not huge. Secondly, there's a little part of me that's teaching my middle daughter, who is more introverted, to be able to converse with people on a level where she's comfortable. In the school system, she was often retreating and hiding, and so I really want to foster that in her so that she's comfortable with all sorts of different people. And then for Peking, and then for my son, again, just providing for him a safe environment so that he can learn and grow without trying to do all of that through a filter of anxiety and anger and frustration, because nobody else really understands him. So that is the reason why I homeschool. I hope that this has been helpful if you have found yourself in any of the situations that I've mentioned. I try to keep them short and sweet because those are very long stories, but I'm just so thankful that God pushed me off of that cliff. I can't imagine where we would be if He hadn't done that. And I'm so thankful for it, because this is the job that I never dreamt for myself, never planned for myself, and yet I am more fulfilled doing this job than I've done in any other job I've ever had in my life. And so yeah, it's win, 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 win as far as I'm concerned. So please, please, please feel free to check out the link down below to the playlist that Leilani has set up with all of us mamas sharing our why. Why do we homeschool? And I hope that it helps you as you focus on the why of why you homeschool, that you won't be distracted by, say, other people's YouTube channels who are like, we're doing, awesome at this, that, or the other thing, and you're like, oh man. That foundation of why means that it's okay if your homeschool doesn't look like somebody else's, or your nieces and nephews are running around all over the province doing volleyball and basketball practices. This was what happened at my Christmas. And for a second there, I had oh man, are my kids missing out? And then I'm like, no, they're not. We're doing the homeschool that God has called us to do. And it's okay if their homeschool or their school system lives look different than ours. So Yes, that's my hope and my prayer for you. Thank you, Miss Leilani, for setting this up. And I hope that this is helpful to all those who watch. So thank you for your time. We'll talk to you later. Bye.